I'm Scott Moore, and I'm a performance engineer. I help to make software and applications faster, better, more resilient. Lately, there's one thing on my mind.
Where's the best barbecue at, man?
So I'm going across the country, talking about performance engineering and barbecue. Join me as we take the performance tour.
Hey guys, the Perf Tour continues. We are now in the middle of the United States, traveling across the fruited plains of the state of Kansas. Tonight, we hit Kansas City, the home of lots of people's favorite barbecue. Tonight, we're going to Joe's Kansas City Barbecue, but not just any Joe's. We're going to the 180 room. That is a special room that Joe's has set aside for events and special things that happen, and special barbecue is served there. So we've got a group coming tonight I'm pretty excited about, and I think I'm gonna enjoy it. I hope you will too. So we'll do some filming of that tonight. Kansas City, the 180 room, tonight on the Performance Tour. If I want to write a book about performance, would this sound cool to you? Would it sound valid? Fix it later. That used to be a good approach, but now those original premises do not hold true. Fix it later is old and dangerous. We used to think, well, performance problems are pretty rare. We don't see them that often. We got lots of hardware. I mean, we got the cloud. We've got unlimited scalability. It's too expensive to try to fix them, so we'll fix them later. We got to get out the product now, and you can tune software later. It's okay to have a little bit of technical debt. Okay. Does that sound familiar to today? Yep. Still, I see a lot of heads nodding. What if I told you this was actually a book written in 1990 by Connie Smith called Performance Engineering of Software Systems? We haven't solved the problem in, 30 years? So when I read this, I was like, so we've went through waterfalls, archaic. Let's go to agile software development. No problems with that, okay? Delivering software faster with smaller releases, nothing wrong with that, okay? We've got DevOps. I asked 2 people what DevOps is, 5 answers come forth, right? We have a cultural shift going on in IT right now. But every year in Black Friday, one of the Fortune 500, several of them go down. They have outages due to volume and performance issues. Why is that? Why do large companies still face these problems? The laws of physics haven't changed, right? And that's a little bit about what we'll talk about. My feeling is there needs to be an extra on the end called the business, and the business needs to be part of that whole software development lifecycle. If you start with the end user's perspective in mind and work your way backwards into the geekdom that we all know and love, you will find your performance issues often and early. Does anybody disagree with that?
So I've got experience there because a lot of what we do is driven by the business. In our organization, IT is essentially like an internal consulting company. The business drives what we do. They drive the requirements. They drive the expectations. But they're also the ones that fund everything.
Right.
So when we identify performance concerns or issues early, this goes back to some of the stuff you said earlier, they don't worry about that because that costs too much money in their point of view to fix it. They're more concerned about getting the product out the door and starting to get the revenue from the product.
That's good. Anybody else have any other thoughts around that? But now, nobody disagreed with me that you should look first from the end user's perspective. But how many of us in our companies are actually doing that? Another topic that keeps coming up is how do I shift my performance left in that cycle? How do I get earlier detection of performance issues before it hits QA? I have an idea about that, but does anybody else have any ideas? How are you trying to shift left, if at all?
So one way we're shifting left is making sure that our architecture is isolated. We don't need a full stack, so we don't have to wait until all the code is done. So once a service or an API is done, then we can go and run those tests in isolation. So that's one thing that we're doing.
And that's an excellent way to approach that too. We are thinking about functionality as the primary focus. Everything else is non-functional requirements now. No, it's performance requirements, it's security requirements. When you gather requirements on a user story that says, as a user I need this to happen, nobody is adding and it needs to happen within this amount of time and it needs to be within these parameters. I don't see anybody doing that. Everybody's worried about getting it out, making sure it works, but if it doesn't perform well for one, it's not going to perform well for many. So by doing those things I just outlined, you fix it at least for one. Then you bring it into load testing and find out if it works for many. But if it doesn't, and that's okay that it turned off, if it doesn't perform well, at least you found it early enough, right? So we've got to think about performance at the same time we think about functionality. If you're in a meeting, if you're in a stand-up, if you're somewhere, and somebody asks a functional question, which they always do, just ask a performance question. How long is it supposed to take? What's too long? How do we know that this will scale? Right? And I think if you do that, we at least bring it up to the front of mind and people go, oh yeah, maybe I shouldn't have a 43 meg web page.